Okay, today I'm going to show you how to create a pivot table using the data from a public resource called Usaspending. And the reason we use the pivot table is that we want to be able to pull past federal award data from Usaspending and organize it in a more manageable fashion. And that's what the pivot table does. It allows you to organize the data to better do your market research on who your top agencies are. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we want to do is to navigate to usaspending.gov. So open up your web browser. And in the web address line, you can type in usaspending.gov, and just make sure that your website looks like the one that's on your screen. At the top of the screen, we want to hover our mouse over award search, and you'll have two options here, keyword or advanced search, and we're going to click on advanced search. And now at this point, you can see on the left a list of different filters to select the criteria that you want to pull data for. And what we're going to do is first go to the time period. So we're going to select the three most recent completed fiscal years. And you're welcome to run the data however you want. You could just do 1 year if you wanted to, but I recommend doing the last three. And we're right at the end of 2018. I'm just going to go ahead and do 2015 through 2017. So go ahead and check mark those boxes. And we're going to skip down to location here on the left. And if you click on it, you can see you could choose United States, but you can also choose a state. And this is going to be depending on your industry and where you operate and where you do business. Do you only do business in Montana, or do you do business in Montana and Wyoming? Or maybe you have the capability of doing business everywhere in the United States. And what this will show us is the place of performance. So this is where the work took place. We don't want to use recipient location. We want to make sure and use place of performance. So choose the areas that you do the most business in, or that you have the capability of doing the business in. For the purpose of the demonstration, I'm going to choose Montana. And you want to make sure and add the filter down here at the bottom. And just make sure that the state or the states you selected show up down here. Next, we're going to scroll down and go down to NAICS code. And if you click on it, you can type in the code here. I would recommend starting with your primary NAICS code, the one from your SAM registration that you do the most business under. And then from there, as you get used to pulling the data and doing the pivot tables, you can look up some of your other NAICS codes that you also do business in, just to see what other agencies pull up under those codes, if there are any. You can put in multiple NAICS codes in this area. I wouldn't recommend doing that, at least until you get used to the pivot tables. It can kind of jumble the data together, maybe a little hard to separate which NAICS code you're looking at. So for now, I would definitely recommend just doing one code at a time. And for the demonstration, I'm going to use a janitorial code. So I just typed it in there, and then I select the one that shows up. So I'll click on that, and I can see that it pops up down here below. Then you're going to go ahead and scroll to the bottom and click the blue button that says Submit Search. And we can see that our results have shown up here on the screen. The next thing that you're going to do is actually export this data into what's called a CSV file. And to do that, you're going to just come up here to the top to the blue download button and click. And on the screen that pops up, you want to make sure and choose transaction. This will give us everything and also everything here. And this does take a little bit to download. So you can close that window while it's downloading, and as soon as it's done, it'll pop up on the bottom left of your screen. Depending on how much filtering you did, this could take longer. Or if you added several NAICS codes, or more than one, it would take longer, or more fiscal years, it would take longer. All right, so it looks like it's ready. And we will go ahead and click on our download here at the bottom. And you have 4 different files that downloaded. You can definitely look at the subcontract awards just to see, but we're going to focus on the one that says all contracts prime transactions. You don't want to bother with the assistance because you're going to see award information of people who received SBA award or loans or grants. So focus on the contracts, the prime transactions _1. So we'll double click. And once it opens, we're going to actually save it as an Excel workbook. Like I mentioned a moment ago, it downloads as a CSV file. So navigate to the top of the Excel spreadsheet and go to File, Save As, and save it on your computer wherever you'd like. I'm going to save it to my desktop. And I'm going to name the file janitorial pivot. And then on this drop-down menu where it says CSV, delimited, you want to click the arrow and choose the first option, which is the Excel workbook. And then save as, or save, excuse me. All right, so now we've got our working document. And the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and rename our first worksheet, which is here at the bottom. So where it says all contracts prime transaction, go ahead and put your, hover your mouse and right click and go to rename. And we're going to name this NAICS data. And the reason we're renaming it is we're going to have more than one worksheet in the workbook, and we need to be able to determine which data and which tables we're looking at. You want to be able to separate them and know which one is which. And then just from this screen, the next thing we're going to do is actually insert our pivot table right away because we have all the data that we're looking for. So you're going to navigate to the top of your workbook and click on Insert and choose Pivot Table on the left. And when the window pops up, it automatically selects the entire range of the workbook, which we want. We want to include everything, so you don't want to change any of this information here. And you just want to make sure that it defaults to New Worksheet, okay? It should, but just make sure. And then hit OK. So we have a pivot table created from our NAICS data, and it's opened it up in its own worksheet. We're going to go ahead and rename this worksheet as well. So again, hover your mouse over where it says Sheet 1, and then right click on Rename, and we'll name this NAICS Pivot. And over on the right, you can see the pivot table fields. These field names actually correspond to the data we pulled in, the column headings at the top. You can see those here. And that's what's going to correspond, that's what's going to help us determine what fields we pull in is using this box over here. First, we want to alphabetize them. So go ahead and click on the arrow by this gear image, and choose A to Z. If you know your column heading, you can search for it up here in the search box, but I recommend alphabetizing it also so you can more easily find what you're looking for. The data points that we're going to pull in is first, we're going to look for awarding agency name. So scroll down your list until you find the awarding agency name, which is this one here. You'll click it with your mouse and hold and drag it down to this rows box. And now you can see your table is starting to fill in with information. The next thing you're going to do is drag in awarding sub-agency name. So click again and hold and drag it down to rows. So now what we're looking at is the head department, so Department of Agriculture, and then the sub-agencies underneath it. There's more sub-agencies in this, but these are the ones that are showing up because they have purchased products or services under the janitorial NAICS code that I input at some point during, the last 3 fiscal years. And it's important to also look at the sub-agency rather than just the main department, because this is ultimately who you'd be doing business with, is the sub-agency. And that's really what we're looking for. And the last one we're going to pull in is called Federal Action Obligation. So we'll scroll down to the F's, and here we find Federal Action Obligation. So click and hold and drag down to values because it's a number, and this will allow us to see the total sum of the awards for those 3 years under that NAICS codes per agency. I also like to format this information over here. We definitely want to put the amounts in order from largest to smallest, so you can see who spends the most, because that's who you're going to want to focus the most effort into doing business with, is who spends the most. So highlight, or I should say, click on the cell with the bold number next to that, whatever agency's on the top of your spreadsheet. And then you can either come up here to the right and click on sort and filter, and you'll want to do largest to smallest. The other option is to right-click right from your document, click down to sort, and choose largest to smallest. And as you can see, the data changed right away. It popped up the Department of Defense to the top of my list. The next thing you want to do is sort each set of sub-agencies in order from largest to smallest as well. So all you have to do is highlight the non-bold numbers under the first agency on your list. So in my case, it's 2, just these 2 numbers. And then again, you can come to sort and filter, largest to smallest, and you'll see that the data below it changed. These were already in order, so the ones below have changed to be in largest to smallest. And next, we're going to go ahead and format our cells so it has commas and a $sign. It makes it a little easier to read. It's a personal preference, but to show you how to do it, you want to click on the letter B to highlight the entire B column. And you can hover your mouse anywhere within the gray color and right click. Click on Format Cells. And then come here under Number and choose Currency. It's 2 decimal places, $sign. It's already pre-filled, and hit OK. Now you'll notice that my fields over here on the right for the pivot table have disappeared. That's okay. In order to see it again, you just click anywhere within your table and the information comes back. So as you can see, this is what we're looking at is for that janitorial code for years 2015, 16, and 17 in Montana. The Department of Defense was, the largest buyer of those services in those 3 years. Specifically the Air Force, and then the next one is the Army. And then as you can see, the Department of Ag, specifically the Forest Service, is potentially also a good customer. And then you can go on down the line and you see which ones are the highest amounts. So those are the agencies that someone in a janitorial firm would want to focus on. just like per your NAICS codes, the higher dollar amounts is who you're going to want to focus on. The next thing I want to show you is how to create a pivot table using your PSC or product service code. And we're going to make it the same way, but we're just going to use a different type of code. The difference between those codes really is that NAICS are descriptive of what your industry does and what the government does or what that specific agency does. And then a product service code is descriptive of what you actually sell, your products and services, what you sell, and what the government actually buys. It's important to look at both. You'll notice, likely you'll notice some changes between the different pivot tables, and you'll see agencies at the top of the list or even added to the list on PSCs that may not be on your NAICS pivot table or vice versa. So it really just gives you a comprehensive look to all the agencies that you should be doing business with. So in order to do that, go ahead and come up to the top of your pivot table and minimize your window. And you can close out your download here. And come back to your web browser where you had created your first filter for the NAICS. And we're not going to change very much information. Your filter criteria should still be in there. But we are going to scroll down and we're going to hit the X to delete my NAICS, and you want to do that as well. And we're going to click on PSC or product and service code. And for mine, the best one is S201. Now most of you should have some product service code listed on your SAM registration. If you don't, PTech can help you identify what those are, or if maybe you're not sure if the ones you've picked are the correct one, we can also help you identify those. And just like the NAICS codes, you can rerun the data under different product service codes to see what results you get. So once you get used to doing this, you can do your own experimenting on the data that you pull in. Okay, so since I've added it here, I'm going to resubmit the search. So click Submit Search. It's already changed. And so we're going to go ahead and download this data also. And so go and click on the top right where it says Download. We'll choose the same option, so that's going to be Transaction, and then Everything, and we'll just wait for the download to finish. Okay, so that is finished already, so we'll go ahead and click on our download to open it, and again we're going to choose All Contracts Prime Transactions. So open up that file. Now instead of just using a pivot table from our new data, we're going to actually copy this data and put it into the other workbook, because then we have everything in one place and you don't have multiple spreadsheets. You can just work off of one workbook. To do that, you come up to the top left of your spreadsheet where the square is that has the triangle in the bottom half, the darker triangle, and you're just going to click on it. And it's going to highlight all the data in your spreadsheet automatically. And then you're going to hover your cursor somewhere in the gray and right click and hit copy. Go ahead and just minimize this window for now and come back to your pivot table, the first one that you made, this workbook. And we want to put this in a new worksheet, so in order to do that we have to add a new one on our own, but that's easy to do. If you just click this plus button here at the bottom, it's going to open up a new one for you. It'll default to highlighting cell A1, which is good. So go ahead and hover your cursor in A1 and right click. And go ahead and choose paste where it says 1, 2, 3, and this is for the values. This will make sure that everything gets copied from the original spreadsheet with our new set of data. And it'll pop it in right there. Again, we're going to go ahead and rename our worksheet. So hover your cursor, right click, and rename. And we're going to call this one PSC data. And we'll create a pivot table right from this data. So navigate to the top of your workbook, click on Insert, click on Pivot Table. Again, make sure that you don't touch anything in here because we want the whole spreadsheet copied, and that make sure it's going to be going into a new worksheet, and hit OK. Go ahead and rename this worksheet. Hover over the letters here at the bottom, right click, rename, PSC pivot. Okay. And we're going to pull in the same data that we did before. First, go ahead and alphabetize your list by clicking where the gear is and click on Sort A to Z. And find your data points. The first one is going to be awarding agency name. Click and hold, drag down to rows. And the next one is awarding sub-agency name. Click and hold and drag down to the rows box. And then finally, federal action obligation. So we can see that here. Click and hold and drag it down to values. Again, let's sort the information. So highlight the top bold number. And if you need to find the sort button, it's on your home tab, or again, it's right up here. You can right click, sort, largest to smallest, and click on that. Sort within the head department, so I'm going to highlight all three of these that are non-bold. You may have more. Just don't include any of the bold numbers. Click on sort and filter, largest to smallest, and you'll see the numbers change order down below. Go ahead and format your numbers to be in currency, so click on B at the top. It'll highlight your whole column. Hover in the gray area with your cursor or your mouse, right click, format cells, click here, choose currency, and hit OK. So you can see that the information for the janitorial firm did change a little bit. It pulled in some Department of the Navy. And the reason there's some differences is the procurements under this dollar amount would have been assigned a different NAICS code, but they were assigned that PSC code I typed in. So, we'd have to research to find out what NAICS code was assigned, which we can, you can find out that information. But it shows you that there are some differences, and the Navy could be a potential customer. And I think looks like the Department of Veterans Affairs, actually, the dollar amount has increased, and I think they've actually moved up on my list. Yeah, so they did. So they're actually now, looking at the PSC data, or pivot table, excuse me, the VA is actually a more prominent customer. So you can see it's important to look at both. This does conclude this video, how to make the pivot tables for both NAICS and PSC. There will be other videos related to the pivot table. The next video is going to be about how to find prime contractor information, their contact information and the awards they've won. Use that data to find potential subcontract work. And then I will also show you how to use your pivot table and some other resources to find the office locations in which have procured the products and services from your pivot table.